Kai Havertz's charge on Rodri at the beginning of Sunday night's match between Manchester City and Arsenal has been horribly overlooked. With Rodri out for the season, the push and later collapse of the player might yet have profound consequences for City, and it might yet have profound consequences for Arsenal, a team who last won the league title a long 20 seasons ago. Welcome to the Luke Alfred Show. I have 30 years of experience on the front lines of sports journalism, covering some of the biggest games in cricket, rugby, the FIFA World Cup, and even the Olympic Games. Come and join me as we learn about some of the greatest sports stories you've never heard. I'm Luke Alfred, and welcome to the show. Before we kick off with this week's sports story, I'd like to tell you about an open role with the Luke Alfred Show. We are looking for a digital marketer to join our team. We aim to introduce our superb product to a larger audience. Please see the details in the show notes. Listen carefully for a minute. Close your eyes to use your ears. Turn them in the direction of the English Premier League. Keep on listening. Keep those eyes closed. Tell me, what do you hear? Is it the scramble of rats and mice at the bottom of the table? Is it the more considered note of mid-table clubs industriously squirreling away points as winter approaches? Is it the sound, perhaps, of lungs filling with air? The pleasing sound of the title contenders bellowing their claims like clam sellers at their barrel? Perhaps these aren't the only sounds we hear. Maybe there's another sound, one to which we have to listen carefully. Maybe, if we listen really hard, really straining to listen now, we can detect the faint sound of creaking. Yes, there it is. That's unmistakable. That's definitely a creak back there in the soundscape. What could it be from, that creaking? I'll hazard a guess. That creaking is the sound of a club battling under the weight of expectation. Who could the club be? It's not immediately clear, so let's think about it for a minute. Which London club have never quite been able to meet the burden of expectation the club's name brings with it? Ah, yes, it must be Arsenal. Arsenal got to a Champions League final and they won the consolation prize of a couple of FA Cups under Arsene Wenger. It must be Arsenal. They haven't won the league title since 2003-04, let's not forget. So the sound of creaking is the sound of weighty expectation, weight upon weight being placed on Mikel Arteta's and Arsenal's shoulders. And make no mistake, the weight is heavy. The weight is heavy because it's compounded weight. It's not only the weight of the club and the weight of their supporters, it's the weight of history, bearing down mercilessly all those statistics. What a burden. It's the pulverizing weight, increasing year upon steady year, of not having won the title since 2003-04. That's 20 years right there. 20 years of gaining weight, 20 years of weight watching. That's heavy. And the weight is increasing because it doesn't only come from Arsenal. The weight comes from the legions of floating voters who we all know are out there. These are folk who just can't bear to see Manchester City take another title. They, like all you Arsenal fans listening to this, can't even bear to think about John Stones' equalizing prod at the Etihad so very late in the game last Sunday. Such fans, who often have their own club to support, mind you, would like nothing other than to see their club win the title. This goes without saying. But if this isn't achievable for the sundry Brightons and Evertons and Brentfords of this world, they'd dearly love to see Leandro Trossard score the winning goal in Arsenal's final league game of the season, therefore condemning Manchester City, Liverpool and Aston Villa or Spurs to second, third, fourth and fifth respectively. They'd celebrate as if the title were theirs. They'd celebrate as if they were Arsenal supporters. So no pressure, because many of us feel somewhere deep down inside that finally fair play needs to express itself. The universe needs to align and Arsenal needs to win the Premiership title. It has been so long, and we all, Manchester City fans excepted, need a change if the title race isn't to become a season-long procession. Which brings us to last Sunday, for the match of the Premiership season so far. As a neutral, I was captivated by Arsenal's approach from the very moment that Kai Havertz bumped into Rodri in the first seconds of the match. Is bumped, though, the right word? A fair word? Might the word barge not serve us better? Whether bumped or barged, you knew it was going to be juicy from that moment on. Rodri was completely taken aback, so taken aback that he fell backwards onto the turf, while Havertz sort of shrugged. The inscrutable young German was doubtless relieved that the referee, Michael Oliver, didn't ask for his name and put it in a book. How could Oliver have taken it further? He was ball-watching. The Havertz charge, see now how we've cannily upgraded the word from yellow to red, as it were, might even have aggravated Rodri's knee ligaments. If it didn't, it was, at the very least, a way of setting out Arsenal's stall. It's seldom you find real sharp needle in a match of this kind. The players tend to be too professional for that. But here it was, the old needle, very sharp. Suddenly, as Rodri went down, Manchester City had been pricked. Pep had been pricked. We had been pricked. It was bloody marvellous. Rodri went down in such a heap that you wonder if the first injury wasn't a kind of pre-injury to the injury to follow. What he did in the pre-injury was to tweak or strain things ever so slightly. 16 minutes later, the ligaments already weakened, he seemed to only stub his boot in the turf. It was hugely innocuous. He didn't seem to be touched, yet his knee ligaments were ruptured. They were so badly ruptured that Rodri will miss the entire season. It is a disaster for City and something that might well have been craftily initiated by Havertz and, of course, Arteta. Mateo Kovacic is a fine player, but he's getting on, and he has neither the gravitas nor the game of Rodri. The websites and newspapers didn't say very much at all about what happened early on in the centre circle when Havertz and Rodri experienced their little moment. They have, however, been quick to point out that Havertz and his teammate, the young Dutch defender Jurrien Timber, didn't complete a single pass against City. There's a logic at work in concentrating on non-passes. They're empirically verifiable, although they don't really add up to a great deal, now do they? The theme of no passes might have been fluffed up, soufflé-like, into a Tuesday morning filler, but who were Havertz and Timber going to pass the ball to? They were defending their 2-1 lead after Trossard's sending off. Why try to extend your lead when you can defend it? Defending can also be exciting in a kind of when will the damn wall collapse kind of way. You aren't going to pass your way out of trouble with 10 men. Best pass on the passing your way out of trouble philosophy and revert to a 5-4 formation that requires lots of running and lots of facing the ball as you dig in for a long, rainy afternoon. I found the dig-in fascinating. It was like watching a documentary about the First World War. It was fascinating in the same way that the post-lunch session in a test match is often fascinating. There you are, a beer or two worse for wear. There the players are, giving the impression that they're a beer or two worse for wear. Nothing much is happening but the sunshine, which pours down out of a clear sky. An uneventful over goes by, and another, and another. Your mind wanders, comfortable in the knowledge that nothing is going to happen, which is a sign the universe takes for something to happen. A wicket falls, and another, and because you haven't been paying attention, complacently certain that nothing is about to happen, you miss the fall of both wickets, so look for the replays on your phone. Stones' goal couldn't have come any later. It came so late that you could easily have missed it. Many did. It was remarkable. The phrase late equalizer doesn't in any way do justice to its lateness. It was a sort of beyond midnight equalizer. Forgive me while I interrupt the sports story to tell you about the Luke Alfred Show Patreon. As you may know, being a writer is not the most lucrative career choice. Please consider making a small donation to keep the show going at patreon.com/The Luke Alfred Show. But for now, let's get back to the story. After the late equalizer, City's Erling Haaland indulged in a little late equalizing of his own. He became in a slightly lost in translation altercation with Gabriel Jesus, Arsenal's Brazilian striker, and mouthed off at Arteta. He may or may not have thrown a ball at an Arsenal defender. I didn't actually see because I was too busy trying to lip read. Finally, Haaland also reserved a few philosophical reflections for 17-year-old Arsenal substitute Miles Lewis-Skelly. Haaland's indiscretions were roundly criticised as the media mill went into overdrive in the days to follow. The tabloid media in Britain is very good at indulging in this hyperinflated meaninglessness, with the so-called respectable press not so very far behind. Everyone climbed into the ring, getting in a few twitchy combinations, swinging wildly. Folk berated Haaland and folk berated the folk berating Haaland. Ex-players on both sides got their digs in. It's amazing how much non-news, in other words, opinion, hot air, accusation and counter-accusation, you can wring out of a game of football. And, because it happened so early on in the game, miss the very incident that might have been as important as the result. Quote, "Give them bread and circuses," said the Roman satirist Juvenal, "and they will never revolt." Arsenal's parking of the 10-man bus in the second half against City raises a couple of post-Etihad questions. One of them arises further up the pitch. Who is going to score enough goals for them to win the league? When Arsenal last won the title, they scored 73 goals in the league, 6 more than second-placed Chelsea and 9 more than third-placed Manchester United. Of their 73 goals, 44 of them were scored by Thierry Henry and Robert Pires. Henry scored 30 goals that season, Pires 14. The next highest Premier League scorer in the season, if you're interested, was Newcastle United's Alan Shearer on 22 goals. Behind Shearer, on 20 goals piece, were Ruud van Nistelrooy and Louis Saha. Last season's top Arsenal scorer was Bukayo Saka with 16 goals. True, Arsenal scored an impressive 91 goals all season, 5 less than Manchester City, but Saka only scored 16 of them, so who scored the others? The short answer is that they came from everywhere on the pitch, with the Manchester City game providing a kind of snapshot into the fact that as far as Arsenal are concerned, a Ricardo Calafiori goal, anyone? They can pretty much come from anywhere, including sizzlers from left back. So maybe the question of who will score Arsenal's goals is a red herring. Perhaps the answer of how they will win this season's league title will have to come from elsewhere. Maybe the Rodri foul, we have again upgraded the level of the offence, gives us a clue. Maybe the answer of how they will win the title won't come from them at all. Maybe it will come from the fact that City, their rivals, will be without their most influential and trusty player. Should this all sound a tad conspiratorial, consider this. City look rather like an imperial superpower. It's very difficult to see how they can be toppled by fair means. They're rich and talented. They have remarkable bench strength. Witness Phil Foden and Jack Grealish coming on as second-half substitutes against Arsenal, and have a proven history of winning when it matters. To add further alarm to our analysis, they have no discernible weaknesses. Could boredom be one? Maybe foul means are the answer. Perfidy has a long and illustrious history in sport. Think of the so-called Butcher of Bilbao, Andoni Goycochea, who snapped Diego Maradona's ankle in a tackle from behind when Maradona was playing for Barcelona in the early 1980s. And well do we remember when the All Blacks skipper and open side flank, Richie McCaw, stuck out a leg against Argentina in New Zealand's opening match of the 2015 World Cup at Wembley in London. The Argentine captain, Fernandez Lobé, took a quick tap, herring downfield with a try a distinct possibility. McCaw, seeing what was about to happen as he lay in a ruck, tripped him. The try was never scored. Here's an excerpt from the passage of play. The voice you're about to hear is that of referee Wayne Barnes. The All Blacks were, incidentally, only in a lead of 9-7 at the time.
And we're seeing the 7 black there trip the player who takes a tap penalty. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay,
yes.
so 7 goes to the bin.
Correct.
Well, Richie McCaw, the All Black captain, is going to the sin bin.
After a jittery start that saw the All Blacks at 6s and 7s, they went on to beat Argentina by 10 points to get the defence of their crown up and running. McCaw said afterwards of his trip on Lobé, quote, "It was one of those things. As soon as it happens, you wish you hadn't done it. I knew straight away that it was a reflex thing, that it wasn't the right thing to do, and I suffered because of it." McCaw was not wrong to say that he suffered. He suffered 10 minutes in the sin bin. To suggest otherwise is disingenuous because really no one else suffered here besides Lobé and his team. Never let it be said that McCaw didn't know what he was doing. He was a past master at approaching referees beforehand to find out how they'd approach the game, tailoring his skullduggery to what they'd told him. You can take a dim view of this. McCaw would tell you, however, that this is social intelligence applied to sport and is part and parcel of where he used to find himself. Looking in on his actions and Havertz's actions from the outside, we might think that the players shouldn't have done what they did. But sportsmen, in the highly competitive cut-and-thrust world of international sport, are comfortable with these acts of petty and not so petty malice because they see them as acts in the service of the greater good. McCaw didn't go out to hurt Lobé, he went out to stop him. The two things are different. This leads us to the conclusion that morality might best be left outside of sport. Within the confines of the pitch or the field or the court, there are rules. In an attempt to gain a small advantage to help winning, these rules might be stress-tested. They might also be bent or even transgressed. This is what sociologists of sport and psychologists call, quote, bracketed morality, which is the idea that codes of behavior on the field are not subject to the normal concepts of morality off of it. The two should not be confused. In other words, notions of morality applicable outside of sport shouldn't be superimposed upon it. Why, you might reasonably ask? Well, because to do so is to commit a profound category error. The morality of the world and the rules of the game from within it are not to be mistaken for being one and the same. In conclusion, watch this space. The Havertz blocking of Rodri and Rodri's subsequent knee ligament damage might yet have a profound implication for Manchester City's season. It might yet have profound implications for Arsenal's seasons. I might also be barking completely up the wrong Premiership tree. We'll have to see. We will certainly know more as the season progresses, and we will also know more after Arsenal entertains City at the Emirates on the 1st of February next year. That one should be worth circling in the diary. While we are listening carefully to the weight of expectation breaking Arsenal's back, we might also like to consider the slightly inconvenient fact that they arguably had a far better side when they last won the league title. You might disagree. You might also point out that the comparison is slightly irrelevant. 20 years ago, Wenger was in charge, putting into action his lovely and famous quote about there always being one stage in a player's life where their value exceeds their price in the market. A smart man and a mathematician, Wenger had a pan-European sensibility that was largely absent from the English game when he arrived at Highbury. And he acted on his quote about value and price, didn't he? Both Patrick Vieira and Henry were playing in Italy when he brought them to Arsenal, but they were playing in the reserves, Vieira in the Milan reserves, Henry in the same predicament at Juventus. Remember who was in that Arsenal title-winning side, a side who went through the entire season without losing. Jens Lehmann was in goal. Kolo Toure, Sol Campbell, and Ashley Cole were at the back. Vieira and Gilberto Silva were the holding midfielders. Ray Parlour, Cesc Fabregas, and Freddie Ljungberg were in the more orthodox midfield roles. Up front was an aging Dennis Bergkamp, and then there was Henry and Pires, busy as beavers as they banged them in. That was a pretty handy side. Are they quite as handy today? We will know over the coming months. The one topic we haven't discussed so far in the show is the Arsenal gaffer, Arteta. Arteta is from San Sebastian in the Basque country, close to northern Spain's border with France. As a boy, Arteta went with other promising youngsters from Antigoko, an amateur club in San Sebastian, to La Masia, the famous Barcelona academy, where he rubbed shoulders with players like Andres Iniesta and Victor Valdés. Over time, he became a very fine player without becoming a special one, unlike, say, Iniesta, who shone brightly as part of a Spain golden generation. Two things are worth mentioning here, although we should be careful about extrapolating too robustly from Arteta's CV. The first is that Basques, and Arteta is a Basque, are proud separatists, a people who are sailors, fishermen, and apple farmers. They believe they discovered America before Columbus. It is less obvious today, now that Spain has become prosperous, but once upon a time the Basque separatists wanted independence from the hated Madrid. As a Basque, Arteta cannot escape this, as he cannot escape the way that Basques play the game, which tends to be more aggressively than the rest of Spain. Arteta, though, is patently unlike Iniesta in that Iniesta has nothing to prove. Contrary to that, and contrary is a good description of the Basques, at least some of the time, Arteta very definitely has something to prove. Having never quite done it as a player, he never played for Spain, for example, he wants to do it now. And who better than to do it against Pep, who he has known for such an awfully long time, and the other Basque managers of the Premier League. I am feeling my way here slightly, but I do sense Arteta's divine discontent, something which perhaps accounts a little better for Arsenal's approach to Rodri, the incident we have all already forgotten. Arteta is young, now in his early 40s, but not so young that he is wild and thoughtless. He will feel that he can take City and Liverpool on and do more, beat them, which he'll have an opportunity to do when Liverpool visit the Emirates at the end of October. He will be acutely aware after finishes of 5th, 2nd, and 2nd over the last 3 seasons that he must now wrest the title from City's grasp. There was a feeling, after all, given Wenger's resources, that Arsenal were incapable of winning the league regularly. No one was going to admit that publicly, of course, but Simon Cooper, the football journalist, certainly feels that that was the case. Finally, Cooper argues, Arsenal's checkbook under Wenger was just not quite big enough, and they couldn't compete. I doubt very much that Arteta agrees with that analysis, and surely isn't going to accept it as gospel. Why would he? He has a league title to win. If you enjoyed this episode of The Luke Alfred Show, please give me a 5-star rating. As an independent creator, this podcast is made possible through your support.